I didn't have an energy pouch, so we're just doing an energy drink. I get it. You're sitting here watching another Death Note video in your malaise of not quite being at the point where you want to rewatch or reread the whole series for the upteenth time. You know that you're sure as hell not going to watch that Netflix movie, and you may have heard about the Japanese live-action movies that came out around the same time as the anime, but there's no way that a live-action adaptation, especially one that's condensed into 4 hours of screen time, could ever be any good. And you'd be mostly correct. But perhaps you're thinking, wait, aren't there 4 movies? How are they all only 1 hour? Well, you are correct that there are 4 movies, but only the first 2 actually cover the plot of the manga, while the 3rd and 4th are just kind of weirdo fanfiction. Don't worry, we'll get there. But what if I told you that there was a Death Note that you may have not even known existed, and that it was a live-action TV series, and that it was good, and that it can fix your constant existential dread about the heat death of the universe? Okay, you can't do that last one, but hey, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Death Note 2015, simply named Death Note, colloquially referred to by only me as Death Note Redux, is a reimagining of the original Death Note manga, which debuted about 12 years before this series. However, unlike the Death Note anime, which attempts to stay very faithful to the source material, or the first 2 Death Note movies, which make changes in order to truncate the story into its form factor, Death Note 2015 attempts to faithfully carry the overarching plot and themes while providing various smaller changes that aim to provide a more streamlined and classic story, while also addressing a handful of complaints that had often been lobbed at the series before. This is why I call it the Redux. Death Note 2015 still has the same characters and story beats that you love, but changes things up so that older fans are still consistently surprised by a new experience. For example, the whole Ray Pember and the FBI agents arc is flipped on its head when it's revealed Ray was carrying a fake badge because why would L have them use real badges but thought to give the normal cops fake ones? However, the biggest change is easily that Nier and Mello, while a bit different than their manga counterparts, appear right from the get-go so that Nier's inevitable introduction to and takeover of the investigation team doesn't feel sudden or forced. While they don't play a major role in the plot up until their proper intro, this little tweak and added scene here and there go a very long way in fixing one of the most widely complained about parts of the original. Other characters also receive little tweaks and changes that don't really break the character, but I'd argue add a nice flavor that adds a little bit more depth to them. Ray, as I alluded to earlier, is a lot more intelligent and nearly catches Light single-handedly. Misa is a smaller idol, which allows it to be far more believable that she'd be dating a random fan. Yes, Light is actually a fan of Misa in this version. L is also a bit more cocky and takes pleasure in trying to catch Light, while admitting that he believed that Light could have been an amazing detective just like him, and had been using the Kira investigation to bring Light to his full potential. Speaking of Light, he has, by far, the most change. He starts this series far more emotional, wanting a simple and quiet life, and we see his disgusted reaction at realizing he's responsible for the death of 2 individuals. While we do see a flashback to this in the manga and anime, by the time Ryuk finds Light in those, Light has already accepted it and moved towards sociopathy and his narcissistic god complex. In this series, however, we actually get to watch his evolution and corruption in a much more evident and, I'd say, believable fashion. There are many key moments that highlight this shift towards a more emotional Light, but I think the most evident is with the Linda L. Taylor scene. In other adaptations, Light kills this fake L with zero hesitation and barely even a comment. In Death Note 2015, we watch as L's script actually gets to Light and forces him to yell in response. We watch a frustrated and scared kid have to justify his actions as he's being confronted with an actual ethical challenge. This is the moment where Light goes from using the Death Note because he can, to using it because he believes he's the only one who could. And this actually leads us into our last little transition and the bit I teased in the last video about Netflix's Death Note. Go watch it if you haven't. See, I have this sneaking suspicion that Netflix actually took more cues from this series than it did the actual manga. Both change Light and start his arc in a very specific way that is not exactly like the manga, and happen to be so alike that I'm not sure I can really call it a coincidence. Both begin with a more lethargic Light just trying to make his way through life. When he finds the Death Note, the first death he doles out is to a bully who intimidated and assaulted him, while the second is a criminal with a connection to the death of Light's mother, the event that acted as the catalyst for Light's distrust and distaste towards police officers and his own father. This hatred then boils over into Light's sense of justice as he begins doling out death penalties around the world. However, not before Light tries to get rid of the Death Note, only to have Ryuk warn him that giving it up will only lead to Ryuk finding a new owner, and one that is potentially far more dangerous. The Light we see come out of this in both cases is far more rash and reactionary. He clearly has emotions and lets them get the better of him. He allows others to easily play him into making various decisions he probably shouldn't, but through all of it, slowly evolves into the genius we've come to expect from the series. And if you heard all that and are now somehow thinking that Death Note 2015 must be as bad as the Netflix series, stop. As I said at the top, this one's pretty good. Do I recommend it as somebody's first experience with Death Note? No. It changes too much in ways that I think can only really be appreciated if you've at least seen the anime. This is actually a series I recommend to fans of Death Note because whether or not you think it's as good as the original, it will give you that feeling of seeing Death Note for the first time again. Ultimately, the changes act as ways to keep the experience fresh rather than to condense the story or cheapen the experience. It treats the original with respect and acts as a proper adaptation, while also cutting some of the fat and offers old fans with twists that will keep them engaged and wondering what will happen next while holding on to the original's tone. Which is something I cannot say for the Japanese live-action movies. You ever wonder what would happen if you gave a fanfiction writer a movie budget? Because we're gonna find out together when we discuss Death Note the movie and its sequels, The Last Name, L Change the World, and Light Up the New World. And L is hot. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't seen the first video, you should go watch it. And if you have, just go watch another video. Like, comment, subscribe, do that stuff. Subscribe to my podcast. Attempts were made. It's good.